won't negotiate. He won't deal with our long-term spending problems without us raising taxes. Won't even sit down and discuss these issues.
And House Speaker and Republican leader John Boehner conceded to a debt ceiling vote Wednesday that raises the government's borrowing authority with no strings attached. Boehner, who you just heard right there, saying that his members are unhappy about the extension, but the president gave them no choice. The move, many say, is a huge concession to Democrats following weeks of debate, ending a 2-week shutdown. House Republicans originally wanted to tie an increase to the restoration of military pension cuts, but this stipulation has now, of course, been dropped. Republicans didn't get anything in the deal, and joining us all to talk about this right now is Rick Ungar, senior political contributor at Forbes. Rick, it's great to have you with us.
Hey, John, how are you, man?
It's great to talk to you again. The debt ceiling vote certainly not without controversy here, particularly for the people who voted for it. Majority Leader Eric Cantor, Majority Whip Kevin McCarty, and Chief Deputy Whip Peter Roskam, 4 members of the GOP leadership here. What's your take on the way the vote went down?
Well, actually, I think if you're a Republican, and we all know that I'm not, it was a pretty smart thing to do. This is not a year where you want to have the same kind of controversy that we've seen the past couple of years. But I think the bigger point here, and hopefully Americans are starting to get it, the time to have the fights over our debt, and I'm with everybody else, I think our debt is wholly unsustainable. The time to have the fights is not on what I call the back end. People forget that raising the debt ceiling is about paying the bills that Congress has already voted to spend. That's not when we should be having this discussion. The discussion has to be had on the front end. So if I were John Boehner, I would have done exactly what he did, but the very next day, I would have said, okay, we now have begun the next period of spending money that we're going to be talking about because we're going to have to raise the debt ceiling again. Can we please get serious about a real discussion over how we take on this deficit?
Well, we just heard Dick Morris, who is here with us on the set, saying, you know, the excuse we hear from liberals is that this is money that we've already committed to spending, but Morris said there can still be cuts made. Should have still been some concessions, and that argument doesn't hold a lot of water.
It does, though. It's a reality, whether Dick Morris likes it or not. That's exactly what raising the debt ceiling is for. Doesn't mean you can't make cuts on any day of the year. You can. But the mere fact that Dick would characterize it as he did tells us what our problem is. This is not a liberal conservative issue. You only have to know how to do math to understand that the debt cannot be sustained at this level for a very simple reason. If, God forbid, our relatively low interest rates right now, what the government is paying to borrow money, is at about 2%. If it were to go up 1%, we would increase that interest by 50%. This is potentially, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's a potentially big problem. Rather than characterize this as a liberal conservative thing, here's how we should be characterizing it. There are 2 huge entries in our annual budget. There are entitlements, and there is military and defense spending. Traditionally, if you're on the left side, you want to say, hey, don't touch my entitlements. Let's cut the defense spending. If you're on the right side, you say precisely the opposite. The only way this can ever be tackled in an honest way is for everybody to say, look, these are the 2 largest items in the budget. We have to find rational ways to attack them both. And by the way, they're there. I'll start with entitlements because I'm a Democrat. I'm supposed to be defending them. In our food program alone, we have about 14 different federal programs. They overlap. If you have a child, if you're getting food stamps because you need to get food stamps, and you have a child who goes to school, there's a very good chance that child is getting free lunches, free breakfasts at school as part of a different plan. Now, if you're getting food stamps, theoretically at least, you should be getting enough to feed your family without the kid getting an additional free meal.
And that makes perfect sense. Rick will bring in David Patton, senior editor of Newsmax magazine. We were actually hearing a liberal guy like Rick talk about reforming some of these entitlement programs, but we also heard him mention...
we can't miss the other side, though, which is the military side.
And David has the military side. Why don't we hear this from Speaker Boehner, like Rick talked about, where he's going to lay down a marker and say, we're going to start today. It's a new day. We're turning over a new leaf, and it's time to get serious about spending right now. Because you know, Rick in some ways is right. This is not, the deficits and the debt are not a liberal or, you know, conservative issue.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
Hey, man.
I agree with Rick that the timing is upside down. You can't wait to the end of the process after these huge debt liabilities have been incurred and then say, that's it, we're going to turn the spigot off and we're going to end up putting the U.S. economy in a tailspin. That obviously is not going to be a political winner for either party. I think the problem with Rick's suggestion is that in Washington, until a building is on fire, no one calls the fire department. Mere smoke.
Oh, I agree with that.
Right? So mere smoke isn't enough.
I agree with that. But what you're really saying is, and you're absolutely right, it's all about the politics. Nobody in Washington is really concerned about the debt. They're worried about the politics of the debt, and you couldn't be more correct.
Yeah, and American people, though, are really tuning into this right now, and it's going to be a problem, I think, for both parties, especially for the people who have been around Washington for a long time. We'll move on from this topic. I also want to talk to you, Rick, while we have you here, since you focus so much on healthcare policy. We had yet another delay in the Obamacare process this week. The delay of the employer mandate, the second in less than a year, will give mid-size employers yet another year before they have to provide health insurance to their employees. Here is a clip of the president defending the new delay.
So it's giving people more flexibility and more opportunity to do what makes sense for them. And ultimately, I think that's going to be good for our economy.
Well, Rick, do you think it's actually going to be good for our economy?
Which, the delay? Look, you know, I think people like myself who have been, you know, we've defended the healthcare reform, and I still am very inclined to defend the approach and the law itself. But we're all getting fed up with the spin on both sides. We really are. No, I don't like that it was delayed again because it was clearly done for political reasons. The president didn't want to have this issue hanging as we went into the November elections because we all know that the